Apple have surprised us with the new M2 Pro and M2 Max inside the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, and we also have an updated M2 and M2 Pro Mac Mini. We were told that this update was coming in November 2022, but it never came to be, and we're guessing there's some production issues along the line or something like that. But the main thing is, we have updated chipsets all around, and let's first of all talk about the M2 Pro and the M2 Max and what Apple are promising us from these chipsets. So with a keynote type of video that looks like it was cut from a larger video that could have been part of an iPad and MacBook video from last year, we first got introduced to the Mac Mini with the M2 chipset. This is the same chip that's inside the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air from summer last year. But then a surprise happened. The M2 Pro made its debut at this point into the presentation, and it's going to be put inside the Mac Mini. So let's talk about what the M2 Pro has to offer, and mainly it's to do with additional cores. If we do a comparison to the M1 Pro, it gave us 10 cores in its CPU, and these were made from 2 efficiency cores and 8 performance cores, or the bin version giving us 6 performance cores instead of the total of 8 performance cores. For GPU, it was 14 or 16 GPU cores. There was also a video encoder and decoder too. But now the M2 Pro is a little different, as you will see here. It gives us a total of 12 cores in its CPU, with 4 of them being efficiency and 8 performance cores, or 4 efficiency cores and 6 performance cores for the binned version. For GPU, it's now 16 or 19 GPU cores, and there is also an improved video encoder and decoder too. So really, we're talking about 2 additional efficiency cores, we're talking a little bit more cache on that processor, and also we're getting around 2 or 3 more GPU cores too. Now, I will say at this stage, it does sound impressive that the M2 Pro is getting all these additional cores. And a little later on into the presentation, we were shown the M2 Max with the MacBook Pros, and let me run through the numbers of cores on this chipset too. So again, in comparison to the last generation, the M1 Max CPU was exactly the same as the non-binned M1 Pro. So this gave us 10 cores in its CPU that were made from 2 efficiency cores and 8 performance cores. Then for the GPU, we were given far more cores. We got the choice of either 24 or 32 GPU cores, and we also got 2 video encoders and decoders. Then, for the M2 Max, just like the M2 Pro, we have 12 cores in the CPU, with 4 of them being efficiency and 8 performance cores. But this time for the GPU, it's now 30 or 38 GPU cores. We also have some more cache as well, and there's also an improved dual video encoder and decoder too. On paper, the brand new M2 Pro and the M2 Max sounds absolutely groundbreaking in performance. But not everything is as it seems. Apple's Tim Millett, who you can see here, showed us comparisons of the M2 Pro over the M1 Pro to start with, as we can see here. Tim basically said that the M2 Pro had up to 20% more power than the M1 Pro in CPU and up to 30% more power in GPU performance. Whoa, 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 whoa! Let's do a reality check here. 20 to 30%, is that it? To be honest, that's not really groundbreaking or super impressive. If I did my little finger in the air sort of theory here, if we had an M1 Pro chipset export a file and it took in Final Cut Pro 20 minutes to export that file, basically the M2 Pro would probably just take under 16 minutes to do exactly the same file. To me, that is not a lot. When you think about it, when we used to have the Intel MacBook Pros and we had the 13-inch model, the top spec model of that, you know, when we did an export on that, say the export took 20 minutes with that Intel chipset, with its dedicated graphics and all of that, the M1 Pro, when that came about, did exactly the same video in around about 4.5 minutes. So 20 minutes down to 4.5, that's quite impressive. Whereas here, we're going from about 20 minutes with M1 Pro to M2 Pro, taking about just under 16 minutes. So really, it's not the biggest leap in the world. But moving on, let's see what Tim said about the difference between M1 Max and M2 Max.
Which delivers up to 20% greater performance over M1 Max. And M2 Max has a much larger GPU. Combined with a larger cache, it delivers up to 30% greater performance.
Yup, same story. 20% to 30% increase with CPU and GPU. And again, when you think about this, if I did my example again with exporting a video, you get the idea. It's going to be about the same differences between M1 Max and also M2 Max. Don't get me wrong, I think the upgrades that we have got in the M2 Pro and the M2 Max are quite adequate, especially that Apple have got to keep pressing on with more power in their chipsets. But the story is now reminding me of old Intel from 2010 to 2020 with their i7 series, for example. We got marginal improvements each year, as you can see in some of the benchmarks. And as you can see here also, in my opinion, about the M1 Max to the M2 Max, you will see here the M1 Max multi-core score, and here is the M2 multi-core score too. You can see there isn't a lot in it, even with those extra cores and the cores tuned up a bit with slightly more performance in them. So at this stage, it might sound like all doom and gloom. It does look like Apple are just going to be increasing their performance by about 25% on average every single year. But that's not going to be the case, because when M3 comes along, things are going to be very, very different indeed. We've had reports that TSMC, the manufacturer of Apple's chips, are making 3nm die chips for Apple and their Macs, and if you didn't know already, the M1 and the M2 chips that are currently out right now are made on a 5nm die. Now, the reason why you may want to hold out a little bit longer for an M3 chipset, an M3 Pro, an M3 Max or Ultra, whatever it is because of this 3nm die process. What this essentially means is that all the transistors and bits and pieces on the chipset will be pressed even closer together and in an even smaller form factor. With that, you get greater efficiencies and also you get better performance because everything is even more closer. Then tie this in with what Apple does with their chipsets. They clock them up a little bit higher with their megahertz or gigahertz, whatever they're going to do there. You can imagine putting these two together is going to be a great combination in a power boost in performance and also better efficiencies. Don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting to see a 100 power increase in the M3 chipsets over, say, the previous generations. But what we're probably more likely going to see is that if you compared a normal M1 chipset to the normal M3 chipset, you're probably going to see something around about 60 to 70% speed increase over those two generations. And that is very impressive, and it might definitely be worth waiting out for. I'm going to say it again. I don't want to put down M2 Pro and I don't want to put down M2 Max because they are definitely really good chips. And I've not even talked about efficiency either. Apple have also claimed that on the MacBooks that you should be able to get around about an hour extra battery life on the already impressive 17 and 21 hour battery life that existed with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. So to get an extra hour on top of that is really quite something. We've actually not lost any sort of battery power, we've actually gained it, what is again really, really impressive to see that Apple have done this. So yeah, they are really good, these chipsets. But I think you can see where I'm coming from here. If you can wait out a little bit longer, definitely get yourself an M3 variant of those chipsets when they come out. And they're expected to come out the end of this year, 2023, or early into 2024. And it's not that far away. And I'll be updating you guys when those chipsets are most likely going to be coming on this channel. So make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to get more information about that. But at the same time as well, guys, I would also say that if you are on an Intel machine right now, the clock is ticking for you. And I would definitely say you should upgrade yourself to an Apple Silicon chipset right now if I was you. Either option of getting an M1 or an M2 chipset is definitely a worthy upgrade. If you want the best of the best, get yourself an M2 Pro and M2 Max. But do remember there are some great deals out there on the previous generation. So for example, I have seen lots of deals out there where you can pick up the 14-inch MacBook Pro with an M1 Pro for about $1,500 now, and that is $500 less than when it came out, and you'd still get the warranty and everything like that. Keep an eye out on retailers for this because it is a really, really good deal, and you'd be saving yourself $500 just to get about 20% sort of less power than what you'd get in the M2, and that's if your budget is tight. But if you do want to push yourself to get the best of the best, yeah, definitely get yourself the M2 Pro and the M2 Max. But at the same time as well, if you currently are on an M1 chipset right now and you're currently looking to upgrade to the equivalent same chip, so say if you are on an M2 Pro or an M1 Pro and looking to go to an M2 Pro, I wouldn't bother. But if you are, like for example on the Mac Mini on an M1 and you're looking to upgrade to the M2 Pro Mac Mini, then yeah, maybe it probably is worth looking into doing at this stage. But also do remember that M3 is around the corner too. With that, guys, that's everything I've got to say about the new chipsets. What are your opinions on it? Do you think the M2 new chipsets are worth upgrading to if you've got the current M1 sort of generation, or do you think you should skip it for now? I would love to know your thoughts. And on that note too, guys, it's time to wrap up this video. So if you have enjoyed watching it, please do press the like button. And as I've already said, if you want to hear the latest Apple news, reviews, and comparisons, please make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Until next time, guys, I will see you really soon. Take care. Bye bye.